Welcome back after a lovely week off to the College Football UK podcast. I am your host, Fletch, and as you already know, three stunners are with me today. Nick, Sam, Garrett, how are you three gentlemen after a lovely week? I say a lovely week off. Nick, you had an eventful week last week. Sam was in London and Gary was ill. So, how was your week? How was your last 2 weeks even?
Yeah, pretty good. I got to enjoy the one thing that Gary didn't get to enjoy.
Thanks. Yeah, just rub that in for me, Sam. I appreciate that. But yeah.
You did get to go to Silverstone, so
I did get to go work at Silverstone, which was great. But then I obviously had waylaid by the dreaded double red COVID line, which meant I missed the massive event in London that Sam came down for. It looked like it was a great time. But I'm going next year, definitely. Staying away from anybody who's ill next year.
What about you, Nick?
I survived. My truck broke down. I went to a comedy gig, and for the first time ever in my life, a riot erupted. A fight erupted at a comedy gig. So, dozen people fighting, men, women, just haymakers everywhere. You know, as you do.
So, where was this comedy club exactly?
It was at the.
Paul Smith.
It was Paul Smith. It was Paul Smith, and it was at the Manchester Arena. And it
was
kicked
Manchester.
Off right,
there you go. There you go.
Right and royally.
This is what happens when you put Scousers in Manchester. It doesn't work. I have tried telling everybody it doesn't work.
When I went and saw Paul Smith, over a year ago now, it was just after COVID, there was also a fight right by us as well. So I think it's just a commonality with the type of people that go and watch Paul Smith.
Scousers.
Cheers.
End of story.
It was
a bit of a sweeping statement there, Fletch.
I mean,
what was that about Manchester this week, Gary?
There was not enough security for the amount of people that were fighting. It was sheer bedlam. So...
Yeah. As you can tell, though,
nice
no love lost there between our brothers and sisters in the Northwest. Having said that, no one actually asked me, but it's fine. I had a week where today was the first time since Monday that I touched grass. I have the actual outside grass,
not
the legal
kind
of grass. The legal kind of grass. The first time I touched that since Monday, which was lovely, but I have been boxed away in my room. As you know, we've mentioned a couple of times over the last few weeks, a video game came out. That a lot of people were very excited for. I spent a long time on it. I know that
you need to spend
Gary,
more on it, mate.
You shut up. Sam, I know you've had a chance to play it now, and Nick, as you said multiple times. So over the weekend, we are going to do a little extra special treat for everybody, and we're going to review the game, but we're not going to do it today. So keep an eye out on the AAW Network YouTube channel and podcast platforms for that episode. With that in mind, with that bit of news, Nick, I heard you've got some news for us this week. Some things have been going on around college football.
I have. I mean, that was news item number one. Apparently, some football game has come out. So if I had the time, I would play it. It looks great. But
I think, like Fletch, I've been squeezing time out in strange, lunch hours. It's just I've got an hour, I can log in. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, I'm squeezing as many hours onto it as possible.
Fair enough. Right, news item number one. Utah State have fired their head coach, Blake Anderson, for, and I quote, significant violations of his contractual obligations. Now, the statement says, and I want to quote this right, the reported requirements include a prohibition on employees outside the USU Office of Equity from investigating issues of sexual misconduct, domestic violence, And Anderson apparently failed to manage the team in a manner that reflects Utah's academic values. So, all in all, he's not been a very good boy, and they've sacked him for it.
He's either not been very a good boy, or he's not been a very good boy at keeping his charges very good boys.
So, Nate Dwelling, who has been the defensive coordinator, will act as interim coach for what will probably be the entire season.
It's a bit late to change head coach now, isn't it?
Yeah. Iowa QB Cade McNamara insists he is 100% healthy after his knee injury and subsequent surgery that cost him his entire season last year. If a player says he's fit, who are we to believe that he's not? I believe last year he transferred to Iowa from Michigan, if that's right. Mr. Michigan will tell us anyway.
I believe so, yeah.
Right, okay. I believe you. LSU have pulled off what they quote a stunning move and have landed the 5-star recruit DJ Pickett. He was the top-ranked athlete at the Rivals 250 Combine that I talked about the other week. So I suppose Baton Rouge for him. And finally, Alabama are going to name the field after Nick Saban. Not the stadium, the field.
Saban Field.
The Crimson Tide will play their games on Saban Field at the Bryant-Denny Stadium. Sounds like when Newcastle played at the Sports Direct Stadium at St James's Park.
Sounds a bit weird, but I suppose they have to do something for Saban, right? You know.
Yeah. 17 seasons, 6 national championships.
Godfather of coaching in college,
201 29 record. You can't really knock him, can you?
You can try, but no, unfortunately, his record does stand for itself. So naming the field, I mean, it makes sense. They're running all over him. It's a bit of a weird one. But what else could they? As you say, the stadium's already named, so they can't really rename it the Nick Saban because they want to get some money for that naming rights, I should imagine, at some point.
Exactly.
So that's the news.
That's the end of the news, gents. There's no point in me going back 2 weeks, so that's the news I've got for this week.
Interesting. I wonder if that'll change. It's always interesting late in the season how impactful that's going to be for Utah State. They're losing their coach, right just before. Well, I suppose they've got time to change it up, but there's not many coaches out available for them to plug somebody back in again, is there? Spring football's happened and stuff, so it's so I think they're going to have to run with their interims.
Right. I do apologise. My laptop restarted just before we went on, so I'm just trying to get the page back up that had my information on it for the.
Professional as always on the Asleep at Work network.
There we go. So, your trivia question for today is: which NCAA football subdivision, subdivision Division 1 team has the most or holds the record for the most consecutive bowl wins? So a point for guessing the right team, and a point for guessing the kind of the length of the record.
Bowl wins.
Bowl wins.
Doesn't matter which bowl.
No.
Nope.
That's an interesting one. And it's an FBS.
It is an FBS
bowl.
D1.
Toledo.
Nope.
I'm thinking it's going to be one of those. Not going to be obviously one of the Power Four. It's going to have to be one of
No, I don't
those
think so.
conference ones that come through and play one of those Gatorade, what it
Liberty.
cost, something like that. TCU, no, it won't be TCU.
Yeah.
They got
Liberty.
battered last year.
I'm going to go with Liberty.
If you want a little, it's not an active streak. It's not active.
Right, so they haven't been at a bowl for a while, but the last time they were at
It's
a bowl,
not that
they
they've
won.
not been at a bowl for a while. It's just that, the streak, the longest streak,
right?
the
Is it gonna
longest
be what-
streak
right
of all
now?
time.
Right, so it's going to be like a it's going to be like, is it like a tech? It's not like a top school. So it's got to be like a tech school or a sub school of a, like the second or the third
UTEP
school
or
in a
something.
massive city or something. Either that or it's some state out in the middle of nowhere.
Or it's something back from 1911 when fucking one team was just the best team and they've just run it up and nobody's got close to that ever since.
Well, if it's not an active streak, it rules out everybody that won a bowl last year.
Not necessarily, because we're only talking the longest streak of all time. It could be
Virginia.
Yeah.
I'll go with Virginia or
Yale.
Texas A&M.
It's not Texas A&M. Can I just say, I think you're overthinking it.
Georgia.
I really do think you're overthinking. No, it's not Georgia.
Michigan.
Nope.
Ohio State. We got to be in a. It's got to be wrong side then. It's got to be Alabama then.
No.
Nebraska. Somebody, Dakota. Somebody out in the sticks.
Again, no.
Washington.
I give in.
This is a
Florida State.
Florida State. That is correct.
Oh, Gary!
We hold the longest.
The most consecutive bowl game wins. So in on December 30th, 1985, when they beat Oklahoma State in the Gator Bowl, all the way until the Orange Bowl in 1996, January 1st, 1996. That was 11 bowl wins in a row.
Billy Bowden years. Yep.
Gary, you should have known that.
Do you want to have a guess at who ended the 11-game bowl winning streak?
Michigan.
Nope.
Or did you say it was the Orange Bowl they ended up losing it in 96?
No, the last one they won of that streak, the last one they won was the Orange Bowl, where they beat Notre Dame 31-26.
So then it was 97.
So
they lost a bowl game.
A year later, they played the Sugar Bowl, lost that one, but who to?
Alabama.
Nope.
Miami.
Getting closer.
SMU.
Geographically closer.
It would have been the Florida Gators? No, it wouldn't have been the Gators.
It's the Florida Gators.
Yeah, it would have been the Gators, yeah.
So, there's a little bit of trivia for the week.
There we go.
And more importantly, so
it was the
couple
last
of weeks
time we were good 20 odd years ago before we kind of resurgence.
Yeah. Well, if you think most of the time, especially now, a lot of the players, if you've got anyone who's generally draft eligible, the majority of them will not play a bowl game. A lot of them will go and get prepared for the combine, etc. And you talk your seniors, etc. The bowl games I don't think have the same appeal as they used to. So you're not talking stack teams.
Prime example being the bowl game we played this season when all of our draft eligible players decided to not play after being snubbed. And it ended up being 63-3 or something. We got absolutely pasted in. Freshmen and juniors and whatever else all kind of got absolutely stomped by.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, talking about it, because I've got that right in front of me, and the reason I've got that right in front of me is 2 weeks ago we spoke about the group of 5. Unfortunately, Gary, you were not with us because you were off gallivanting around Silverstone.
I know. What can you do?
So this week, we're going to put a little bit more attention on a couple of specific conferences like we'll do next week. This week, we're going to focus on the ACC and the Big 10. And we will start with the ACC. So I'm going to throw this to you first, Gary, with you being our resident full-time ACC supporter.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you didn't say specialist there. Considering that trivia question.
And ask you, what are your thoughts as we look towards the 2024 season, with week 0 having a focus on the ACC? What are your thoughts going into the conference this season?
It's an interesting time for the ACC with all of the background noise of the 2 main teams or the 2 leading teams in the ACC looking to get away and split and all of that sort of background noise. I think that is potentially going to have an effect on the games themselves. I think that background noise will affect the conference. It may not get the coverage. It may feel a bit disjointed. I think it's interesting. It's a conference out of 3 this year. I think there's a third team that's moved into that sort of bracket. Before, it was always a top 2 and everybody else, with the occasional one team sort of rising up. But I think this year it's a top 3 team. So I think there's going to be some closer battles. There's some big games in there. Scheduling and the out of conference schedules of teams will, I think, play a bigger part. But I still see it being almost a split conference of the top teams and then the others. I think there'll be quite a drastic drop off from those top 3 down to 4th and 5th.
Yeah. Nick, Notre Dame notoriously have an ACC-based schedule. Despite being an independent school, you kind of join in with them for your games. How are you feeling about going into this season? I know that officially you can't compete necessarily for the championship for the ACC, but
well, I was going to say, if we could, then it'd be fairly obvious who was going to win this year. But as we can't, there you go. I think you only have to look back at last year. I remember going out to the College Classic at week 0 last year, and speaking to a lot of the fighting Irish out there, people in the airport going home and stuff like that, and having spanked the Navy last year, everyone that you spoke to had exactly the same opinion. It wasn't that game that you needed to be worried about. It was the bigger games on the schedule that that you had to be aware of. Now, one of those games was USC, which they turned up, had a bad game and what have you, and Notre Dame rolled them over. So I think I actually think that division is one of these where if you do not turn up on your game, you can be rolled over by whoever you're playing. It doesn't matter whether you're playing the worst ranked team in the division or the best ranked team in the division. You turn up and put the effort in when the other team doesn't, and you will win that game. And that goes for anybody. So there are going to be ups, there are going to be downs. There's going to be games where you say, I didn't see that coming, and there's going to be games where teams are going to walk it. That's just the price of competition.
Apart from Stanford.
No comment.
Well, speaking of Stanford, They are one of three or four teams entering the conference this year, with the California Golden Bears and the SMU Mustangs, both of which the Cali are coming in off a .500 season. SMU are coming in off an 11-2 season.
Mm-hmm.
But Stanford are coming in off a 3-9 season. So, that
Not
probably
massive.
look as well as with the off season, least likely to have kind of acclimated to now being in a Power 4 conference.
Yeah. A big step up for some of those teams. And also, I think historically, the divisions and the conferences have been geographical. It's clearly not the case anymore, but I think that coast to coast travel that some of these teams like the Bears and the Cardinals are going to have to face is going to have to play an effect, and it will play an effect on some of those games, I think. But for all the conference, anyone who's doing like long distance journeys and travels, it's going to be impactful. It has to be. If you're traveling from Florida to California, that's like 4 different time zones. That's how many thousands of miles and stuff. It's an insane amount. I believe there's a stat out there somewhere that probably some of these college teams are traveling more than like around the globe sort of distances in this season. So I think it's going to be definitely impactful, but I do think Stanford are going to find it a bit of a step up.
Yeah, I think the stat I read was something like USC are going to have to travel just shy of 40,000 kilometers this season, and the Earth's circumference is 40,075 kilometers.
Yeah, and if USC have to do it, then Stanford, who are not massively far from there, have to be probably in the same ballpark figure. It's insane.
Sam, have any of these teams in the ACC caught your... Well, other than, I guess, you're obvious in Florida State, Clemson, and we've spoke before about how Miami have kind of had a really, really good recruiting class in the transfer portal and out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Are those the three you're looking at? I know we've just come out of the draft having seen someone like Drake May go number 2 overall. But it looks like North Carolina might have a dip. Who are you looking at this year?
I mean, I went through each of them. I spent a good 20 minutes going through every single team, looking at their fixture, looking at their schedule and sort of working out what they were going to do. And I've got Florida State 11-1, Miami 11-1, SMU 11-1, and then I've got 3 teams who are going to 10-2. So I've got Clemson, NC State, and Virginia Tech. All 3 teams are going to go 10-2, and then Louisville at 9-3. I mean, I've got if you include Notre Dame, I've got 10 teams that are going to have
bowl-worthy records
over 0.500 records this season. So I think it's an interesting division, interesting conference. So yeah, I think it's just going to be a case of who out of those 3. I think I've got each of them beating each other: Florida, Miami, and SMU.
Mm-hmm.
And I think out of those 3, I think I had that right. Yeah, so I've got SMU beating losing to Florida State. I've got Miami losing to Virginia Tech, which I thought was an interesting one, just because of the way that Virginia Tech are.
Interesting. It's at Miami. You thought,
Yeah, I just think it's one of those where I think it's the expectation that Miami might win, and they'll just somehow lose. Just one of those sorts of games. And then I've got Florida State losing to Miami. Again, Miami. So
you have Florida State winning in Clemson then. Oh.
I do, yeah.
They're at home to Clemson, aren't they?
They are. Yeah, they are. Yeah, Clemson are coming into the Doak. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got them. I think like I say, the only game I've got them losing is at Miami. But I also
I've got us losing at the Irish, to be honest. I think that's the only game we might lose.
Yeah, I think it's just such an interesting division. I think it's going to be one of those where it's just who's going to beat who the most, more than anything, as to who's then going to get there. But
I think you look at that schedule though, or that chunk of Florida State schedule that you've got. We'll go from. In fact, I'll go through the whole schedule here because it'll take quite quick. Obviously, week 0, traveling to Ireland and playing Georgia Tech. That that should
Hopefully
be a
it's a
win
win.
for
It
Florida
should be.
State. Don't see anything
Yep.
else. Then obviously you've got Boston at home, and then you
A
get a
week
bye
after,
week.
which is weird. Yep.
Then you got Memphis at home, California at home. I'm guessing you don't see either of those being losses. We don't see any of those losses. So
Nope.
straight off the bat, you are
Yep.
technically 4-0 with a bye week in between there. But that's when it starts to get a bit rocky. And you're away at SMU. You're at home to Clemson. Okay, you've got a bye week then. But then it's at Duke, which may not be the most difficult.
Never easy to, but it's never. As Nick says, you got to turn up for every game, and away at Duke is one of those ones where you could easily go, it's only Duke.
And Duke have memorable factor, by the way, the British. I think he's
forget
linebacker.
Linebacker, defensive player of some description.
Yeah. So you got Clemson bye week at Duke, which, like you say, got to turn up for. Can't switch off for that one. At Miami, who we've already mentioned have had a fantastic recruiting class, both in the transfer portal and as far as actual kind of freshman recruiting. Then you've got North Carolina at home. Then you're at
I think the
Notre
Tar Heels
Dame.
are going to be weaker. Tar Heels are going to be weaker this year, so I think that's a win at home.
Yeah.
Then at Notre Dame.
At the Fighting Irish is going to be a key game, I think.
Yeah. But those 7 weeks at SMU, Clemson, bye week, at Duke, at Miami, North Carolina, then at Notre Dame, those 7 weeks are where I think if you're going to take a punch, you're going to take it. May end up, if you're not careful, you could take a couple of rocks there.
Yeah, you could come out of that. You could come out of that easily 5-2. You could, at worst, come out of that 4-3. I'm hoping we come out of that 6-1, but I still think that away at the Irish is a really tough game, and it could be the game that decides, the playoff spots.
Yeah,
I think it is worth noting that actually, I think those, like I say, the SMU Clemson game right before the bye are going to be really important, and then the 4 games in between the bye are also going to be very important. Because those 4 games in between, obviously, they could decide your season. But I think that stretch of, 7 weeks could be really telling as to whether Florida go on to absolutely blitz the league or struggle.
But speaking of that Notre Dame game, they have, what is it, Nick? You have, at Georgia Tech, then Navy at home, then a bye week, then Florida State at home. No real game, I guess, in the top conferences is a truly easy game. But Navy not being the most difficult of games, then without travelling, then a bye week, and then not travelling to welcome Florida State, that's going to be a relatively well-rested Notre Dame team as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, Nick, I guess I'm asking you that. Where do you think, being an independent school, your route to the playoffs may be kind of different? Where do you think, for Notre Dame, that could be won or lost, I guess, for the seedings in the top 25?
I think the problem Notre Dame are going to have is I don't think they're as strong as they were last year. They haven't got. They lost Blake, can't remember his surname, who played at right tackle. Obviously, they haven't replaced Joe Alt that played left tackle, who was an absolute monster.
Blake Fisher.
I think Blake Fisher. That's it. So you've got. I think you've got a weaker Notre Dame team anyway. I would expect, like you said, having seen what they did to Navy last year in person, I would expect them to walk all over them again. They've got to turn up and do it, mind you. But I think all Notre Dame can do is put the effort in and win what games they can. It's not, I agree with all those fans last year. It's not those games. It's the big games later on in the year that you've got to watch, and you've just got to hope that you can pick up some wins down the back nine, as they say.
How do you feel about your opening week game? That's a tough sort of place to go first up, isn't it?
Well, it's only Texas, isn't it?
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M, just to confirm that, yeah.
Yeah, I was referring to it. We're only going to Texas.
Texas is SEC country now, baby.
I believe it or not, I wouldn't be surprised if we walked away with a win, but I wouldn't be disappointed either. It's one of those on the fence games where it could go either way, and I don't mind. I don't mind saying that. I'll be delighted if it's a win, but I won't be despondent if it's a defeat. It's like as you go down, I think is it Purdue next after that? It's Purdue,
NIU.
No, and then you're away at Purdue.
Yeah. So, I'm not really, apart from sort of Louisville at the end of September, I think, and USC at the end of November, which will be probably Thanksgiving weekend.
Rivalry weekend, yeah.
It's one of those where you could either be absolutely smashing it and on a roll, or you could just be spinning your wheels, winning one, losing one, winning one, losing one. So, it's hard.
So good.
It's hard to stick your neck out and say it's going to be this, it's going to be that, because everyone is competitive in that division.
Yeah. Do you think Riley? Do you think the upgrade at QB is going to be enough?
I didn't have an issue with Sam last year. I actually thought he showed his experience of the college game, having been there for
19 years or whatever.
Yeah, 6-7 years in college. He actually showed his experience, and he was able to manage the game better than you would see some players. But I think from an attacking point of view, from an actual creating chances, yes, we might have a better chance, but I don't think we're as strong defensively and in the protection game.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue that I've got with SMU is the amount of linemen that they've transferred in, and it takes a while for linemen to mesh and become a unit. So that's why I didn't have them hitting the ground quite as highly as Sam's got there. I think I'm maybe hoping that that's the case, because they've brought in so many new starting linemen that it's going to take a while for them to get together.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's been mentioned is, kind of hitting the ground running. And like you say there, Nick, as you were kind of mentioning, where you can end up in that kind of position where it could be smooth sailing, or you hit a rock and all of a sudden the wheels aren't coming off, but the ground's really unsteady. momentum is such a big thing, and that's no different when we watch the NFL. Momentum is such a massive thing for a season, and one slight dip in that momentum can be a serious season killer. But when I know we kind of mentioned Appalachian State, Sam, you mentioned Appalachian State a couple of weeks ago as a nod to the longest yard, but the reason they were brought up was quite an important point, is some of those schools start off with a lower FBS school or even a FCS school, because the idea is that you can beat the living snot out of them even if you are not at your best. And it's as good as a pre-season friendly, because you can use that opportunity to get your linemen and your new pieces warm and a bit more up to scratch in a slightly faster paced scenario in real game time. And that's why
I also think that SMU's starting games aren't exactly, I think they're winnable games, quite easily winnable games. I mean, you got at Nevada, then it's at home to Houston Christian, and then BYU, and then they have a bye week.
Yeah, so they could have started off 3-0 by then.
Yeah,
and then they have TCU straight afterwards, which I think again they could win. So you could be looking at 4-0 going into that Florida game. Florida could be probably around the same. Are probably going to be 4-0 going into that game. So that could be a game which could
be a choice at the top of the ACC. That one, couldn't it?
Yeah.
That Nevada game is a week 0 game. So again, what's riding on it is slightly different. It's not as much riding on it. It's a game that you want to win, of course, but there isn't the same thing on it. And then you think, other than that, though, Houston Christian, BYU, a bye week, TCU, and Florida State. Other than the Nevada game, you don't travel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an easy schedule, isn't it? I just had a quick look.
If you look at their last, apart from those two games, the Florida State and Louisville, you've then got the bye at Stanford, at Duke, Pittsburgh, bye, Boston, at Virginia, California.
Oh, I could run the table.
Those after that bye week, that's 6 wins.
Yep.
And by that point,
if they're flying,
yeah, and by that time, like say, if that O-line has already sorted itself out by that point with those games leading up to that, they could easily be, like say, 11-1, 10-2.
Certainly in the mix. Could be.
Yeah.
With, as you say, with the things going the right way, and as Nick says, if a team doesn't quite turn up one day, then easily get rolled. Yeah, I mean that is an easy schedule they have. So yeah, welcome to the ACC, man.
I just as I suppose I'm assuming obviously we're going to be moving on to the next division. I just wanted to see if anyone had any particular players that we'd sort of players to watch. Obviously, there's going to be your typical players that everyone's going to be looking at. But is there any sort of players that people have from the ACC as like a keep your eye on them sort of thing? I mean, I've got 2, but obviously I just wanted to see
I think
anyone else.
The receiver at North Carolina is supposed to getting a lot of noise. Ship, I think his name is. He's a freshman has come out and he's getting a lot of good noise coming out of there. Who else has caught my eye?
I've got Haynes King, the quarterback at Georgia Tech. I think he's looking at his. He hit the same stats as Jaden Daniels, I believe. So for me, he's a player to watch out for, and I think Georgia aren't particularly going to be a great team. I've got 3-9. Yeah. But I mean, if he can put up those sorts of Jaden Daniels-esque numbers in a 3-9 team, then he's certainly a player to look out for.
Yeah.
And the other one, slightly different, is a linebacker at Miami, which is Francisco Mauigoa. Hope I pronounced that right. And again, I think he's a senior now. So just, again, a player to look out for. I think he's going to be, I think he had, was it something like 7.5 sacks last year or something similar?
Saying he was all over the place last year, absolutely, yeah.
18 tackles for loss as well, 7.5 sacks, 18 tackles for loss. He was all ACC. Led the team with like 82 tackles. Great stats.
So those are the two players out of the ACC that I'm keeping my eye on, especially with obviously Francisco Mauigoa probably looking at being his last season in the college, so potentially could be
Eventually a draft.
a linebacker coming into the NFL next year.
Yeah.
Looking,
I mean, Damian Martinez at Miami is a clear or an obvious one. It's, you know, I didn't want to say it, but I think he's just going to run over people. He is a great running back that they picked up out of Oregon, and he's going to be horrible from a playing in the ACC perspective. I think he's just got to run over everybody, and probably will be the rushing leader. But yeah, I think the Tar Heels, Jordan Shipp and Damian Martinez is going to be the ones that I've got an eye on.
Marion Hampton,
I like him.
running back at North Carolina. He's on my list for a player that could really make a name for himself this season.
Yeah, I think
Cam
I
Ward
picked
at
him up in
Miami.
a few Devon leagues.
I think Cam Ward at Miami, after a lot was said about his transfer over the summer,
Got
and
a lot
he's
to live
one
up
of
to.
yeah, and he's at the end of the day. I think let me get the win totals back up, because I did my admin this week and I'm very proud of myself and I want to look at it. Miami are joint favourites with 9. I think it's Clemson, Florida State, and Miami are all at 9.5 wins for the over/under, and I think he's a massive part of why they are up there in that conversation for 9.5. Yes, they've had they brought in a lot of talent, but he is the kind of the corner piece. He's the face of the franchise, if you will, I think, for lack of a better term, going forward. And the success that we kind of would expect Miami to have this season rests on Cam Ward. And at the end of the day, we've seen things like this happen before and go disastrously wrong. I don't necessarily want it to go disastrously wrong. That's essentially a career route. But I'm here for whatever happens. Because we've seen better players come in and end up doing worse after things like this. So, on that note, though, like I said, we've got Clemson, Florida State, and Miami with a 9.5 win total. Now, I don't know how many of you gentlemen like to put a couple of great British pounds on wages over sports, but would you be taking the over or under on any of them? And if not, why?
Be taking the over on Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll be more than 9.5. I probably take the under on Clemson, because I think they are going to get derailed week 1 by running into Georgia, and that is going to take a bit of recovery time. And I think fair play for them for putting it in there, and it's a massive game and it's a first week, and I think it's in Vegas, and I think it's all hoo-ha and whatnot. But I think it's a bad move from Clemson, who have been intermittent in the last few seasons, to run into a Georgia team which I've got tipped for, number 1 or 2 seed at most, at worst for those guys. I think that's a brave move for Clemson to go in there week 1. I think that's going to psychologically potentially damage that Clemson team.
Well, I think that's really interesting. Sorry, Fletch. I think that's really interesting, because a few weeks ago when we had Joe Lonergan on, and we were talking about this, I had Clemson down as my dark horse for that conference, and I was, if 1 or 2 games go their way and they can get on that run, they are that dark horse that could just sit in the background, slowly win, quietly picking up wins here and there, and then when it comes to it, just make those big moves, make the 1 or 2 games count, and they could be there. So they were my dark horse. So I'll certainly say there's a possibility it could go the other way, and they could have a successful season.
Well, we're not talking 5,000 or 50,000 to 1 odds or whatever it is, but it reminds me a bit, like you're saying there, of Leicester. few years ago, where it's a bit like, okay, this is where the season's just going to kind of fall apart. Oh, wait, no, it didn't. Okay, this is where it's going to fall. Oh, wait, no, it didn't. They won again. One of them. I get the way the momentum just kind of hits you, and the ride, the wave that you can just ride then is, yeah. But what I think my question to you there is, I think before we kind of start to move on to the Big Ten, is that game and of Clemson and Georgia. It came out this week because a lot of the conferences have been doing the media days, and the ACC have done theirs this week. The Big Ten, I believe, did theirs a week or so ago. One of the things that's a hotly asked question at both media days was, so Clemson and Florida State and potentially UNC, North, the Wolfpack Backpack, as it's so aptly called. What about them? And both conferences have kind of said, well, we're happy with what we've got right now. We've just added a couple of extras and we're very happy in the position that we're in. It was said this week that neither conference is particularly excited about the thought of Clemson and Florida State. Now, this is what I've heard, not my own opinion. If Clemson are to take a shot at Georgia and say they come out, even if it is scrambling over the line at the end with a bloody nose and a black eye, they scramble over that line and get the win. Do you think that changes the landscape, particularly for how the SEC may view the likes of Clemson and Florida State going forward for membership in the conference? And if so, could that be a then genius move by Clemson to take it early?
With the hope that Georgia aren't quite firing.
Exactly. And it's in Nevada.
Counter that with, if they get absolutely pummeled, does everyone go, yeah, see, that's the ACC for you? That was the comment and that was the argument, the bowl game that we ended up playing against Georgia. Look at the difference between Georgia and the ACC. Well done, Florida State. You went 13-0. You'd walked into a bowl game and you walked into like a combine harvester and you got absolutely pummeled. I think there were some chess games being played by the coach by only playing, red-shirted freshmen almost for that one game just to prove a point. But it's a tricky one because, I think it does. I think it would change some public perception possibly of, maybe the ACC is more competitive. Maybe these two teams might have something to give. But it also has that potential to flip it the other way, as I say. And, if it does end up being a complete one-sided railway crash, then it's only going to further we don't need those two teams in our conferences, which are already strong enough.
I don't think it's going to make a blind bit of difference to the SEC, personally. I think the way that the teams that they've acquired far outweighs the likes of Clemson, in my opinion.
I don't think the SEC needs Clemson and FSU, quite frankly.
I think they're happy for Clemson to have gone to the ACC to make it look slightly better. But I think generally, we'd be talking about we'd be looking at it differently if they hadn't taken on Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas A&M and all of those. But the fact that they've taken these teams, Texas were a championship, playoff team, weren't they?
Yeah.
So, and the Sooners are always a good team. Like this, you're always going to get a good games out of the Sooners.
What the SEC have done of getting that rivalry as well, when they've, as you say, they brought, Texas have now got the Sooners and A&M as their rivals. They've brought some really great games into their conference. The SEC do not need those two teams.
No. And this is the thing: if you take away you add Clemson into the mix, Clemson don't really have the major rivalries in the SEC that the other teams do by bringing those other teams in, the likes of Oklahoma and Texas and all of those. So bringing Clemson in, I don't think will do anything in terms. It doesn't have that same pull. Whereas the likes of the ones that you have there, I think, have a bit more of a pull. So I think they'll be happy that. Well, I'm not saying they won't be happy, but I think that they'll be fine without them.
Yeah. Well, going into this, I would agree straight off the bat that I don't think this game means anything as far as from the SEC's perspective. No, it doesn't. But I can see Clemson thinking it will, and doing that whole yes sir, we'll play it, we'll do the game, thinking, okay, here we go, we're about to show ourselves, and then you could go ahead and, like I say, kind of stumble across that line with a bloody nose and a black eye, and the SEC turn around and go, good for you, no one cares.
I think, if anything, it's going to do the ACC a world of good. Out of anything, I think if they go to win that game, Clemson, it'll do the ACC a world of good. Won't necessarily. I don't think it'll change anything about the SEC, but I think the ACC will hugely benefit from it.
Yeah,
if they were to win.
I can also see Florida State being sat there like, yeah, go on then, Clemson, you do it, go on.
We did it last year, and look what happened to us. Thanks very much. You go now. Anyway,
with that in mind, obviously, so I'm going to ask you for final thoughts. I'm going to go in order of who I've got on the screen. So, Nick, you're first. Who are you taking for the ACC championship this season?
Like I said, if it would be highly immoral of me not to say Notre Dame if they could win it. You know what? I said it on the pod the other week that I fancy them as a dark horse. I will stick my neck out and I will say I fancy Clemson to turn some heads. I fancy them.
Sam?
I'm going to go for Miami. They're going to edge it. They're going to edge it out.
Okay. Gary, are you sticking with the home team this year?
Of course. Of course we're winning the ACC. We're running the table.
Of course he is. Of course he is. So I'm not going to go... I'm not fully sticking my neck out here, but I will go different to everyone, and I will give my shout to Louisville.
Interesting.
Because, honestly...
On a slightly
I need a better QB at Louisville before I would have... They didn't really...
I have Virginia Tech going 10-2, and their over-under is 8.5.
God,
which I think is interesting.
Yeah, they've also got an easy schedule, haven't they? Vanderbilt, Dominion. Yeah. I can only see two at Miami, Clemson. Maybe 10-2, 9-3. I can see them.
And I think it goes without saying that this won't be the last time I mention it. Virginia Tech wins walkout of the conference, entrance of the conference. Virginia Tech takes that, no problem. No, we all agree. Right, fine.
We all agree. Best walkout. Yep. Best walkout in college football. Which is not in college football.
Yeah. Well, that's gutting. But
yeah, properly gutting.
Moving
anyway, we're not talking about
on to the Big 10. I will throw this to you, Sam, to get us started. What are your thoughts on the Big 10? Yeah, the Big 10 /18.
18. Yeah.
I don't see it being too different to what we see every single year, personally. I think it's between Michigan and Ohio State. I can't see any of those other teams. Maybe Iowa probably will be up there as they always are. I think is it the Ducks have joined this
Oregon.
year?
The Ducks are the ones I think. Yeah, the Oregon Ducks are the ones that.
Yeah,
I don't think that. I think they could have a drop off this year. Obviously, losing Bo Nix. He was there, wasn't he?
He was there, but they've picked up Dylan Gabriel now.
They have, but I just think, I don't know. I think again, it's down to that moving to a new division. I mean, you look at Oregon's fixtures. I mean,
Who have they got? Have a quick look.
they start off at Idaho, Boise State, Oregon State, at Oregon State,
at UCLA,
Then they
so
got
they
a
go
bye.
back.
then at UCLA, Michigan State, Ohio State, at Purdue, Illinois, at Michigan, Maryland, at Wisconsin, and then Washington to finish off. And I think I can see them losing. They'll lose to Michigan. I think they'll lose to Washington.
No,
They'll lose to Ohio State. So there's 3 games off the bat. I think they'll lose.
I don't think.
don't
I think Washington are going to. I think Washington will have more of a tail off than Oregon.
I think, yeah, because when you talk about losing Bo Nix, who still to this day no one understands how he was the 12th overall pick in the draft, by the way. And shout out to Sam and Nick, your friend David, who was the only person to call that. I think in the world, even the Broncos couldn't call that one. But don't forget that Washington also lost Michael Penix Jr.
How did he go number 8? Anyway, moving on.
And they was quite similar to Michigan and Florida State in losing a lot of pieces to the draft this year.
Yeah,
a lot.
I just think that final game, it's after a bye week, and if they're staring down, potentially at that point, I reckon they're going to be probably 9-2, 8-3.
Yeah,
I think that could be one of those real slippery games that they just fuck up. Realistically, I just think it'll be a game that something will go wrong.
Yeah. I mean, coming from myself, I think this is going to be a serious down year for Michigan. Losing Jim Harbaugh, losing a lot of pieces to the draft. You talk it. Okay, you've got Donovan Edwards. You've got but some of those big key pieces have gone. Mike Sanister.
You don't know who your QB is yet, do you?
Don't know who the QB is, but actually I was thinking about this before, and then I had an On3 article appear on my Fox. I subscribed to On3 this week because they're doing like a month for $1 for whatever team you want. So I subscribed to the Michigan one, and an article came through before about half an hour before we went on. That kind of actually hit on something that I was thinking about this morning, was the wide receiver room or the receiving room has a lot of questions on it as well. And I think out of the top 5 receiving yards leaders of 2023, 3 of them are in the NFL now. One of them was Donovan Edwards, who, okay, fair enough, but he will be far more involved in the running game now Blake Corum's gone.
Yep.
And not necessarily as much involved in the... He'll be more of the running threat than the passing threat. And even then, that was just over 200 yards that he got. You need a lot more. And I think what's his name? The tight end. Was the second leading receiving. Yeah. Colson Loveland, that's the one. He was second in receiving yards for the season. So I think not only have you got the quarterback, once you find the quarterback, who's he throwing to? No one truly knows. There's a lot of questions over for me, I think, about the Michigan this season that we need answers to before I can seriously say anything. But I do think it's going to be a down year. Sharon Moore is going to retool and put his imprint on the team. So when I'm looking at Oregon, sorry, I realize I'm monologuing a fair bit. I think Idaho, I see a win. Boise State, at Oregon State, all wins. And that Oregon State looks not like they got to travel far, even though they do have to travel for that one. Bye week at UCLA, that's just a bit down the East Coast. That's not too difficult to travel. Michigan State, Michigan State, they're going to kick their ass. Ohio State is the one where I think they could slip up. And that, for me, in week 7, That's the championship deciding game. That's who goes in. That's who gets the 12-0 versus 11-1 record, in my opinion.
I think so. I think that is the game of that whole. I know Ohio State Michigan is always going to get that's the rivalry and whatever else. That game is the
game.
The game. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Ohio State and Michigan goes it's called the game. Even if you play college football 25 and you play the rivalry games and they have the name of the rivalry come up on the screen, Michigan Ohio State is the game. It's what it's known as. And I think, yeah, great. If Michigan go 0-11 for the first 11 weeks, but we beat Ohio State, I'm fine with that one.
Happy with
it's
that.
similar to growing up as a Manchester City fan and going, we could go 0-36 on the season, but if we beat United twice, I'm happy, even though we're relegated. That's fine. If we beat Ohio State,
since we
fine.
that.
I know, but
I think realistic. I mean, I'm just looking at the Michigan's team. I think
don't know who the QB is. Don't know who your receivers are.
Alex Orji, is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
I think he's going to be the starting. I think he's going to be the starting quarterback.
Probably. And he's not very good, is he, Fletch? According to the game, he just threw 4 interceptions against Florida State.
I think he's going to be the starting quarterback. I think is it Amorian Walker and CJ Charleston? They're going to be the guys that he's going to be throwing to, and probably Samaj Morgan. They're going to be the 3 really. And then obviously you've got Colston, Loveland, and Donovan Edwards. I think you're probably just going to see a hell of a lot of screenplays in this offense, and a lot of expect a lot from Loveland and Donovan. I think probably it's going to be the way that you go. But
I don't think you're going to see the ball in the air a lot.
If you've got players of those quality, as long as you've got a half decent quarterback who can find them, you'll still win games.
Yeah, and I think you're going to learn a lot in week 2 from Michigan's perspective when we play some little team from down south called Texas. There's going to be a week where you learn a lot, but I think obviously Fresno State, there's a win for you. As mentioned before,
don't underwrite Fresno State.
After Michigan's performance today, I'm not. But then you've got, I think it's a loss to Texas, a close game, but a loss. So there you go, 1-1. Arkansas State, that's 2-1. USC, probably a win. There's 3-1. Minnesota, probably a win. There's 4-1. At Washington, you're 4-2. Going into a bye, I think you then win 3 out of the next 4, so that's 7-3. I think you go 8-4. Because I think you beat Northwestern and then you lose to, sadly, Ohio State. It's an 8-4 Michigan team.
I don't think you're that bad. I don't think you'll lose at Washington.
I think I've got 9-3.
I don't think you lose at Washington. You definitely lose at Ohio State, unfortunately. Ohio State, I don't know.
And you're going to lose to Texas. We're going to destroy you.
Yeah.
Well,
you're going to lose at Texas. You're going to lose at Ohio State, and you'll lose one of those other weird ones.
Yeah.
9-3. I don't think you lose at Washington. You lose at Oregon. You playing Oregon? You're not playing Oregon, are you?
Yes.
I think you lose to them. Yeah, you are. They come to Ann Arbor, don't they?
Week 10.
I think you lose that. Yeah.
I think that's yeah, but like I said, I think we start off the season 1-1. I think we beat Fresno, lose to Texas, even though that's at home again. The only thing that could be a saving grace is those first 5 weeks are all in Ann Arbor.
I think you want home games later on in the season there because it's freezing, and then you can get the home field advantage. If you get them too early, then it's not so. Maybe.
I think the interesting thing I think for Michigan is going to be is that you've still got a lot of that D line.
Yeah, D line's going to be big,
unbelievably good. So I think that's what you're going to have to. It's going to be a bit like watching the Saints in the NFL. Good on defense,
nothing on
Pretty
the
average
other
on
side.
offense.
Yeah, pretty bang average on the
Just a
other side of the
decent
ball.
enough running, just a really good running back, and a tight end who'll probably end up doing QB things.
Yeah, I think that's Michigan this year. I do think there's a drop off. I don't think you're in the title race, Michigan.
No. And it's also worth remembering now that the Big Ten was split into two conferences in the East and West. And as much as I would love to make this so, by the way, this isn't the Michigan Conference. So we may want to move on to a couple more different teams rather than telling me how Michigan are not going to win it this year. But it's gone from the East and West divisions in the conference to a one overall conference. And that was one of the reasons that, like, you know, the East Conference, you had Michigan and Ohio State, which was why only one of the two teams could make the Big Ten championship.
Yep.
Now that is no longer the case. So just simply the top two teams will make the championship this year. Like most other conferences.
Like the other, yeah, they balanced it out. But I mean, I think what's the Big Ten have done, the additions the Big Ten have made have improved the conference. You know, we said the ACC brought some really good ones in. The fact that the Big Ten cherry-picked the Pac-12 teams to improve there are really now some really good games in the Big Ten. Whereas before, as you say, there was one game in the Big Ten. If Ohio State won, then they went 13-0, and if Michigan won, they went 13-0. It was like that. There was no other real competition in this division. Now there is. I think now this year, I think Oregon will be in the mix really high up. Don't think Washington are not, as you say, just because I think they've lost too much to the NFL. I think they're going to take a while to get in there. But USC, I think, are going to be a good squad. But I do think this is a better Big Ten for the additions. It's not just making up the numbers. But I do think, yeah. I think
for me, it's Ohio State's to lose.
Yeah. With the way they've recruited, the people that they've stolen from Alabama, that they've got just, and it's
and the players that they've kept as well. You look at some of the players
came
that
back.
actually
Lots of players came back. They didn't go to the draft because they wanted that national title. They feel hard done by. I think there's a lot of pressure on Ohio State to win it all, but I also think the talent is.
I mean, they obviously lost some big name. I mean, they still lost Marvin Harrison Jr., which was a massive loss.
Yeah.
But I mean, looking at the players that they picked up and then kept, you had obviously Quinshon Judkins, Egbuka, obviously got Jeremiah Smith, who I've got down as one of my to watch players. Brought in Julian Sane, who I think is going to be an absolute star. Kept Treveon Henderson, who obviously everyone knows about him. So I think, it's so hard to look past them as being the team that'll. I mean, even it seems still got to realise they still have Carnell Tate, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
it's an embarrassment of riches of who they've got back this year. It's
Nick, given the geographical location of Notre Dame, these are some games that you will play a lot. You obviously play a lot of Big Ten teams. I think this season you have. I could be wrong here. Let me just double check. I thought you had Michigan State, but there are a few. Your name does pop up here a couple of times on the Big Ten schedule. How are you? What do you think of the Big Ten this year, given you see a lot of these teams on a semi-regular basis?
I think we may have lost Nick.
I don't think he heard that question.
I can see him.
No, I didn't. Apologies. All I got was Fletch stopping and freezing.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. I waited to see whether you were talking to me, and then when everyone said, "Oh, I think we've lost him," I thought, "Right, you're talking to me." I think I kind of agree with Sam. I think it's Ohio State's to lose. I do think Oregon will be that number 2 team. I think, coming into the division, I think they've improved it significantly. But I love a dark horse. I've said about how I don't mind. There's that team quietly building in the background, just making a few roster moves, improving slowly. I'm not saying they're going to win anything, but I bet Penn State gives some teams a run for their money.
Oh yeah,
because they're not the best team in the conference. They're not going to go to excuse me. They're not going to go away to Oregon. They're not going to go away to Ohio State and absolutely tear it up. No, but they'll quietly put wins on the board where they're expected to, and they might cause a shock or two. And I just think if that second team isn't on their let's say for example Oregon, they're not on their game. Penn State could nick that second spot. It won't be easy, but they are that dark horse that I like to look for in a league.
And again, I mean, they've got obviously Drew Allar and Nicholas Singleton, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Dante Cephas are sort of a few to name on that offense.
Yeah, Lambert-Smith went to Auburn. He's transferred out.
Oh, has he actually?
Yep.
Oh, he has, yeah.
But they got somebody back from Ohio State. They nabbed one of their guys.
Yeah, they don't even have Dante Cephas. He's now gone to back to Kansas. He's gone to Kansas State.
Went back and forth. Is that the guy that went back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of wide receivers. I don't know who's going to be their starting. There maybe Amari Evans potentially.
Who was the guy last year? They had Wallace, wasn't it? Was their top guy last year?
Harrison Wallace. Harrison Wallace the third.
Great name. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they're one of those nitty gritty teams that will, their name Nittany Lions just sums them up. They'll nick games. They'll if teams aren't, as you've said, on the ball, the Lions are easy, and a team good enough that will nick the rough and tumble games, those ugly games that you lose by a point or you lose by a late field goal or whatever else. They tend to come out on top of those ones. So yeah, watch out for them. I do think and they don't have the toughest Big Ten schedule.
No. Penn State are always one of those that are thereabouts at the best at times, but I think they're in the East Conference as well with Ohio State and Michigan, which just always seem to bite them in the backside when getting up to championship games. Because let me just triple check. I had it up a second ago. There it is. Yeah, it was the Iowa Hawkeyes who came runner-up in the Big Ten championship game. But Penn State had an equal. In fact, no. Penn State had an equal record. 10-2 in the regular season. Both went 7-2 in the conference. But yeah, it's always been just one of those things where they're just kind of pushed out by being in the unfortunate position of just not being as good as Michigan State or Ohio State. Michigan or Ohio State. And I think
they'll make the playoffs this year. I think they'll be in the playoffs, which is what they will be gunning for, and they'll be a dangerous team in the playoffs.
That's something I think we can look at in a couple of weeks as well. I think next week we'll have a look at the Big 12 and SEC. But after that, I think the plan is that we're going to look at we can take the teams that we think are going to win conferences. But there are, in terms of the
wider
D1 side of things, there's 9 conferences and 12 spots. So, and the G5 only get 1 between them. Guaranteed. Yeah. So that's 5 playoff spots automatic and 7 that are open.
7 up for grabs, yeah. But just to confirm, then we're all calling Ohio State as the winners of this conference.
I'm going Ohio State.
Okay. I'm going Ohio State.
It's 3 Ohio States with even have you?
Without,
put your
I'm
blue...
not allowed to vote that. Even though I want to vote that, I'm not allowed to vote. That's what we're going with. 3 Ohio's and I'm not allowed to do that.
3 Ohio's and an abstain, or are you keeping your blue tinted glasses on?
No. I'm not going Michigan because I don't want. I want to have a shot at looking at the end of the season and going, do you know what? I won a couple of these conferences and I was quite close to you on some others. I didn't absolutely shit the bed on all of them.
So you're going to get Oregon then?
He's going
I'm
for
going.
the Ducks, isn't he?
I'm going to say, I personally, it's against my core inner beliefs. It's against who I am as a man, and my religion to vote for Ohio State. So I am going with Oregon this
Plus
year.
they have the best. Plus they have the best uniforms.
Yeah,
They do have some good uniforms.
I like the duck as well. I like that the duck mascot that they've got. I don't know, something about it just feels wholesome to me.
So for the Big Ten, do we have any standout players that we're going to be looking at again? I've got two. I've picked two for each, so I just thought I'd throw them out there.
I mean, they're hard to look past the Ohio State safety. He's high draft. You're thinking for the NFL, we're thinking top 10 draft pick.
Caleb Downs.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Elsewhere, I'm not sure.
I've got two. Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. I think he's going to have a good year. And I've gone a bit different with this next one. And this is, if people have watched this show before, they'll know who I'm going to say.
Dominic
and
Raiola.
They'll know exactly who I'm going to get. Dylan Raiola. He's going to be the starter at Nebraska in his first season. And I think he's going to be great.
This would be.
I think if, as you say, if anybody had seen this and watched this, then I think we knew you were calling Raiola's name here.
Yeah, I'll happily, put my neck on the line with him throughout the whole of his career and say, "I told you so." If he does well, and just forget that it ever happened if he doesn't.
Yeah, if he doesn't, it's, well, how was I supposed to know?
Well, I was just leading the hype. It was everybody else's fault.
Yeah. No, it'll be, he just didn't live up to potential. It's his own fault.
Yeah.
He's still a great player inside.
And the Boilermakers have got a good wide receiver as well. Erdine, I think. Edrine.
Yes.
He seems like he's going to be one to keep an eye on as well.
I would say that there's a lot of hype around him this year because of the college game. He was on the cover. He's been in a lot of the promo. And he's a damn good running back. I will say Donovan Edwards is someone to keep an eye out for. He'd probably be someone who goes into the draft at the end of the year as well. I'm not saying he will go very high, especially when you give the position that, like say, the position that running backs are right now, and actually most of the top running backs in the NFL, you've got mileage out of them for a little while at this point. So no team will be I don't think any team will be truly desperate for a top back anytime soon. So we might be someone who goes high, but I think he'll be someone who potentially goes high.
I think as well, he's not going to be the number one running back in that draft. I think Trevion Henderson will be the number one. Obviously, he would have been the number one this year had he gone. So I think he's going to be the number one next year. And you've got the likes, obviously. Again, I think next year there's going to be quite a good few running backs. I mean, Nick Singleton could quite easily go in the draft.
Judkins won't draft, will he? He's not eligible.
No, Judkins won't. Yeah, he's basically Henderson's replacement.
Yeah.
But obviously Henderson, Donovan Edwards. I just think there's too many good ones coming through, and I think when you look at the team,
there was a fair few good ones that went last year that you saw how they went. They didn't go till second round anyway.
Will Shipley ended up at the Eagles and is likely probably just going to play second fiddle to Barkley for the next 5 years.
5 years or whatever, yeah.
You've got Blake Corum who could
I think he's got a chance, actually. I think he's got a chance. I think Harwell likes him.
He's gone into a situation which could suit him.
Yeah, McVay likes him. I think he's got a chance there.
Obviously, Brooks has gone into a situation which suits him.
I think he'll be starting there pretty soon. He'll be starting there as soon as he's fit and healthy.
I mean, they have like 1 billion running backs, so
None of them any good.
No, well, they're all just purely average. But and then who else went running back this year?
Benson went to Arizona behind Connor, didn't he?
Yeah, so he's going to be there. He's going to essentially be his replacement long term.
Yeah.
So realistically, those are sort of, you look at the teams that actually are going to need running backs. Maybe someone like the Chargers if it doesn't work out with the Ravens running backs. Derrick Henry's obviously going to be leaving soon, so the Ravens could be looking for a running back.
Yeah, hang on, because didn't the Chargers take a running? The
Chargers took Dobbins and Edwards,
but they've got a rookie sitting behind them. I think that's
Vidal
took with him, didn't he? Oh,
is it Vidal?
Did he go there? Yeah, maybe the Giants will be looking for a running back.
Yeah, they've got Singletary, haven't they? So
that's about it. So yeah, they'll be looking for somebody.
But then they've just taken on Tyrone Tracy.
Tracy, yeah. So
Kimani Vidal. And I mean, to be fair, they had Isaiah Spiller, didn't they? He didn't exactly work out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think it's such a it's a position that is becoming increasingly more difficult to be
number one in,
or at least be a very high pick in. I think obviously the last one we saw was Bijan, so and he was what, 7th pick, 8th pick, 8th pick,
8th.
So yeah.
So, on that note, I'm going to ask you one more question with regards to the Big Ten, because I think we've had some great conversation here. Similar to the last one, if we put on some wagers, as it stands, the two highest win projections are Ohio State. Oh, there's a typo in here. Whoops. The Ohio State Buckeyes is what he was meant to say. Versus
I can imagine it. It's meant on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
No,
did it start with
totally
an
an
F?
accent.
Mm-hmm.
No, maybe.
Finger just slipped. Mm-hmm.
The Ohio State Buckeyes.
That's the one.
Both at 10.5. Are you taking overs and under? Which one of those are you taking an over on? Are you taking an under on in it? And why?
Under.
On both?
I'll take the under on the basis that, while I do think that Ohio are probably going to win it, it is a competitive conference. There are some good teams. To get to 10, that's not easy. So I would say under.
They have Penn State going at 9.5.
So let me ask you this, Nick. Akron, Western Michigan. Akron, by the way, congratulations to their MAC champions this afternoon. Akron, Western Michigan, bye week, Marshall, at Michigan State, Iowa, at Oregon, bye week, Nebraska, at Penn State, Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, Michigan. Where are the two losses?
Oregon, Penn State.
Oregon, Penn State, could be Michigan. I would say they have to turn up and put the effort in at Nebraska. There's four teams teams in that list that I would say, if someone said to me, "Here's a $5, maximize your money," I'd be betting against Ohio State in the hope that I'd make some money, and they'd be the four teams.
I mean, there's nothing better than Ohio State losing and making money at the same time. Just beautiful.
I know how to play to the boss, you see. I know how to play to the boss.
See where you're going. I'm taking the over on Ohio State. What were the other ones?
The two at 10.5 are Ohio State and Oregon. So they're your two favourites, both at the same over-under.
I would take the under for Oregon. Personally.
Yeah. Over for Ohio, under for Oregon. I don't think
However, if I was a If I was a betting man, I would take the under for Ohio because the odds are better, and just for the sheer shits and gigs.
Yeah.
Well, both of them can go over 10.5, but neither of them can go. Both of them can't get to 12.
Yeah, because they play each other.
So, and again,
Unless
I think
they
I
tie.
would. They can't. You can't tie in college.
Can't get tied in college. Overtime.
Hence why there's like 9,000. The question of the week about the 9 overtimes. They won't let it happen.
Won't let it happen. Got to have a winner.
We've got to say, even if it's 4 a.m, well, they'll do it. So, I think, but like I say, for me, it's going to. I think the week 7 is going to tell you everything you need to know. Both of them should be warm and very much into a rhythm for the middle of the season. Oregon the only reason I would give it to Ohio State is they are familiar with the division, they are familiar with their opponents far more than Oregon are. And that change and a kind of the increase in difficulty of the schedule, I just hope Oregon can acclimate to it quickly and are truly up to that task, because it's a difference at the end of the day, and many of those players don't, hopefully, can acclimate to that difference. Going to recap where we're at right now. So far, after a couple of weeks ago, the AAC, the predictions are as follows. I went with Memphis, Nick went with Tulane, Sam and Garrett also went with Memphis. Nick, you are standing alone on that one, loud and proud. For Conference USA, I have stuck with Jacksonville State. Nick and Sam are with Liberty, and Gary, you have gone with Western Kentucky. Then
I can't hear the Liberty team without thinking of the bloody advert.
Liberty, 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 Liberty. So annoying. It's such a good advert because that's all you think of when you hear that name.
Then in the MAC, Nick and I have teamed up and have gone with Toledo. Sam and Gary have gone with the Miami out of Ohio. Mm-hmm. The Mountain West has myself standing alone on Fresno, Nick, Sam and Gary on Boise State.
Yeah, just because of the blue.
The Pac 1-2 has myself and Sam are standing on some Beavers. We're standing with the Beavers. And Nick is with the Cougars. Gary, you didn't answer that one when we asked you to do it off in the chat this week. Are you with a Beaver man or a Cougar man? Are you a Beaver man or a Cougar man?
You prefer Beavers or Cougars?
I totally forgot about the Pac-12.
Both have their benefits.
Both have their place. Both have their place. Yeah, I'll go Cougars with that one. Just because.
Okay. So Nick, you start. Okay, you and Nick are Cougar fans. Okay, I like it. And then for the Sun Belt, I've gone Appalachian.
Did we choose for the Fun Belt? I can't remember who I chose for the Fun Belts.
Nick is with Old Dominion. Sam and Gary, you both went with Texas State.
Bobcats, that's right.
To clarify, I think this is
none of us went James Madison. Oh, that's interesting.
I think this is
because he's a footballer in UK football. He shouldn't.
He shouldn't be able to. He shouldn't have a college named after him.
I want to say
you're really going Old Dominion for that. You're really going Old Dominion now. Really?
No, the reason
just because of the name, Old Dominion Monarchs, right?
Yeah,
it's the Monarchs.
No. The reason I picked Old Dominion is I literally, I was listening to a couple of songs from Old Dominion like that week, and I bought like their latest album, and I think I said to Fletch at the time, I said, just for the name because I like the band, I'm going to go with Old Dominion, so that's why I picked it.
Okay.
Wow.
And
however, the Sun Belt has the best team name going.
Coastal Carolina or
the Louisiana Raging Cajuns.
Raging Cajuns, yeah.
Whom, as I mentioned in the group chat this week, my daughter wanted me to do the Dynasty with those guys because she liked the name, like you. And then obviously they've also got Appalachian.
Yeah,
I don't know what that says about my my mentality. Is that I share the same attitude towards a team as a
7-year-old girl. Yeah.
My road to glory team is the Marshall Thundering Herd, just for a reference back to the Sun Belt.
And we all went different in the ACC today. I've gone with Louisville, Nick with Clemson, Sam with Miami, Gary with FSU, and finally I've gone with Oregon for the Big Ten, and all of you three have gone with Ohio State.
The correct answer.
That we'll see in December. That's fine. Bear in mind, you can't come to me at the end of week 7 and say, "Oh, Fletch, we've changed our minds." No, it's in now. It's in. End of story. So
we all know that
this is locked in. And while I'm looking at the chart here,
this is locked on, is it?
Keep your eye out for the next couple of weeks, because we will have somebody else joining for these predictions and hopefully joining the team going forward. And I will actually shout this out: if you are from the UK and a college football fan and you would like to join us, please feel free to do so. We'll be looking for a couple of extra people to join us throughout the season to relieve the workload on us all, because it's going to be a big and long season. We'd love to have you get in touch with the AAW network. I realise the time that we've been going and the time on the clock that it says, and it's really bloody hot in Manchester. I'm sweating my back out. So
it's hot everywhere in the UK right now.
On that note, gentlemen, have a lovely evening, and we will see you over the next few days if you want to come and listen to our College Football 25 review.
Take it easy, boys. Great to chat with you. Have a great weekend.
Yep. See you later.
Right.